I want to welcome you back to our study of petroleum land management, particularly the introduction to petroleum land management. And the chapter in the book that you're looking at this week is entitled Leasing the Available Minerals. During this week, you'll even have an opportunity to try to negotiate an oil and gas lease. I think it's important for us to begin here to really understand the value of an oil and gas lease. Here's how I say it. The oil and gas lease is the number one asset of an oil and gas company. It's an asset. Now, let's assume that this piece of paper is an oil and gas lease. It's simply a piece of paper. It's a contract, but it's an asset. I believe that these potentially are very valuable assets to an oil and gas company. And to illustrate the potential value, I'm going to ask a question. It's going to seem like a silly question, but it does have an answer. Here's the question. Potentially, how valuable is this one asset to an oil and gas company? Potentially. Now, we know that this lease maybe doesn't have the same value as this lease, but I'm not asking that. I'm asking potentially how valuable is this lease to an oil and gas company. And to demonstrate it, let me just say this. You know, drilling an oil and gas well is very expensive, or can be very expensive. I've seen some wells that cost a company close to $10 million to drill the well. Let's say that this lease had enough land on it so that the oil company had the rights to drill a well. It was going to cost them $10 million to drill the well. They paid that, they drilled the well, but here's the great news. The well is a producer. It's not only a producer, it's a really good producer. Let's say that the well that was drilled because of this oil and gas lease has now made your company $10 million. It's made you $10 million. This one piece of paper. Here's the question. Is your company happy? Think about it. Do you know what? Even though it's made $10 million, your company hasn't made a penny yet. They've only broken even because it cost $10 million to drill the well. They wanted to make more than $10 million. How much do you think potentially they want this lease to bring in the way of production revenue? 11 million? I'm thinking higher. What about 20 million? I'm thinking higher. What about $30 million? I'm telling you, these are simply pieces of paper called oil and gas leases, but potentially these are assets that are worth multiple millions of dollars. And guess what? Once these leases are acquired and brought into a company, there are people who have the responsibility to maintain these leases, to make sure that they're not lost. During this chapter, you'll have an opportunity to look at some of the important criteria in maintaining leases and understanding what companies must do and what they should never do. I want to run a fictitious story past you, if I can, and just see what your answer might be. Follow the pictures, if you will. I want you to assume that the lady that's on the phone there, it's her first day on the job. She's being hired as a lease administrator. That's her new supervisor. I mean, she looks very competent to me. He's trying to show her the ropes, and he's telling her that a part of her responsibility is that if she sees any leases where there is a delay rental payment due, that it's her job to make sure that those rental payments go out in time. So on January 15th of 2010, the lease administrator picked up this lease, and this is what she read in the lease. It says this: this lease shall terminate on March 15th, 60 days later, of 2010, unless on or before that date, the lessee, the oil company, either does one of two things. Number one, they either commence the drilling of the well or they make this delay rental payment to the lessor in the amount of $10 per acre for all or that part of the lease that they continue to maintain. I want you to assume that this is a very valuable lease to the company, and the company does not want to lose this lease. Well, the lease administrator doesn't want to lose her job either, so she's very diligent. What she does that same day is she requests a check to be sent to the lessor in the correct amount. It took 30 days for the check to come back to her. It came back to her on February the 15th. Now remember, the payment's due on March the 15th. On that date, she picks the phone up, calls the lessor, and tells them that the check is being mailed that day. Now, she's a very diligent lady, so what she does is she packages up that check. She even puts extra stamps on the envelope, and she stamps it with the word rush. She's going to hand deliver it to the post office. She gathers up not only that rental check, but she's got some personal bills. She gets in her car. She lays all of the bills on the seat of her car. There on the very top of the package is the one marked rush. Now, going to the post office, let's assume that there was some road construction. It was a very bumpy road, and here's what happens. That envelope falls between the seats, and she does not know it. She gathers up all of the bills and what she thinks is the rental payment. When she gets to the post office, she puts them in the bin, but the truth was the payment was never mailed. Here's what happens on March 17th of 2010. Remember, it needed to be in this person's hands by March the 15th, but he doesn't receive it. It's 2 days later. Having not received the rental payment, he believed that the oil company was in default, in breach of the contract, and he demanded a release of the lease. The question I have for you is, can the oil company save their lease, or is it lost? If in fact that lease potentially was worth tens or $20 million, what chances does the oil company have to save the lease? This particular chapter is very good for you to understand the importance of the oil and gas lease. Look at it well, examine it well. It's a great chapter.